The ACC seems to be falling apart. And that's not a bad thing. I'll dive into that in just a second. I'm Brian Knight. I am not Bobby Durkins. Not here. If you're brand new here, thanks so much for joining me. Subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, it's free. Thumbs up. And please leave a comment in the comment section. This is a live video, obviously a live chat. But I try to answer my comments afterwards as well. So I always love hearing from everyone, even if they come on here to tell me that they hate my guts. Those are always kind of fun. So let's dive in. The Magnificent Seven. It's not the movie. It is actually the schools who has come together to look at the agreement that the ACC has made with, well, I'll read it for you. I'll read this for you. Now, this is actually I actually lost the article here. Y'all please forgive me. All right. So this is from CBS Sports, and I'm going to read this. You can read this on 24/7. You can read this on a lot of different sports pages. But here we go. I'm going to read this by way of CBS Sports. Florida State and Clemson are among 7 ACC schools examining the conference's grant of rights agreement amid concerns over the league's projected financial standing compared to other Power 5 conferences, according to multiple sources. Now, I'm going to skip down, not read the whole article to you. You can check this out on CBS Sports. You can just Google ACC football, and you'll see this. But the schools include, as I said, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. Notice Duke is not in there. And now we're talking about a potential falling away. All right. And it's because of the ACC exclusive media rights deal with ESPN that runs through 2036. Now, this deal is not a very good deal. All right. This is not a very good deal. And I've come back to this over and over and over again. And I'm going to pause here. Got some people who just hopped in the chat. Will Jones, may there to you. Good to see you. Chase Henderson said, may there, my old friend, beat my sister. And then Parker shows up. The wonderful, wonderful Henderson sisters. Beautiful, lovely ladies, men, whatever. You could work for Bud Light. Okay, I'm staying off of that one. Sterling Swords, what's up? Will Jones, I beat everyone you did. Dwayne Wicker, may there to you. Good to see you. 15 people in here, 4 thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up if you will. James Thompson says, reporting now Louisville to make it. Slim Shady Canes, there's may there not Mr. Durkins. Joseph Tanner, howdy. Louisville makes it 8. That would be really, really cool. But supposedly these schools met in a private meeting with lawyers, lawyered up. And let me tell you right now, to get this done, you're going to have to find the greasiest, most questionable lawyers in the world. You're not going to go down and find someone who's going to not tamper with evidence. I'm not saying that I'm agreeing with that. I'm just telling you, these will be the individuals who gets them out of this deal. This terrible, horrible deal. Okay? And I'm going to tell you this. We could talk about money. We can talk about where each team could possibly end up. Y'all know I'm a Clemson sports show. I love college football. Clemson's my team. There's a reason I have this back here. But folks, if this could get Clemson out of the ACC and into the SEC, I'd be totally fine with that. And I'm going to tell you why. And I'm just going to tell everybody, I have the comment section here. Jonathan Benton says, we need Jackie Childs from Seinfeld. Yes, we do. Don't you remember that when he looked at Kramer and he's like, who told you to put that on? I didn't tell you to put that on. God, that was one of the best dialogues ever. Hilarious. We need Jackie Childs, yes. So the idea, Parker said, explain. I missed it. So everybody, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do for attention's sake. I'm going to turn off the chat from my visibility. All right. And the reason I'm doing that is so I can pay attention and I'm going to come to the chat, because I've went back, seen some of my videos, and it's really horrendous how I'm bouncing back and forth and I lose my train of thought. Y'all keep commenting, talk very bad about me. You're going to do it anyway. At least make it good. All right. So the ACC falling apart is really the byproduct of this terrible deal with ESPN that runs to 2036. Now, I want to throw this out there. I'm 40 years old. I got to thinking about that. It freaked me out. I'm like, holy crap. I would have a 20-year-old kid. I mean, my son would be 20 years old. He is 7 right now. I would be 53. This is nuts. But the deal is that bad. It was poorly handled. They're not making money. And by the way, once again, this reminds us, college football is about the money. It always has been. It's always been about the money more, and now more than ever, every year. And look, that's just how it is. I got a hair sticking up, and it is driving me nuts. But Clemson, Florida State, let's go back to that list of teams who said that they're investigating leaving, or in fact, they're looking at the contract to see if they can break it without having to pay an ungodly sum of money to break it. Okay. So the schools, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, no shocker there. North Carolina State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. They've met with the legal teams recently to examine the league's grant of rights. All right. So there's this deal that they sign with ESPN that runs until I'm 53 years old and I'm 40. My youngest would be 20. He's 7 now. And it is just a terrible deal. It is monetarily, it's not even remotely within the same hemisphere as the SEC. Now let's pause there. Let's be honest with ourselves. Is the SEC the most dominant conference, especially in football? Yes. That's it. So I get that deal. It's kind of going back to Seinfeld, Jonathan Benton. We have to go back to when George and Jerry was pitching the pilot to NBC, and George got all freaked out. He was like, "You mean Ted Danson's making more money than me?" "Yeah, because he's Ted Danson. You're nobody." You remember Jerry told him? He was like, "You are nobody." He's like, "I'm as good as him." He said, "Not even close." Great dialogue. Go back and watch that. So I get it. Folks, Clemson, this could be Clemson's way out if we could to get them into the SEC. And see, there's a lot of people who's sitting out there in the SEC going, "Oh yeah, then rubber hits the road." Okay, great. Great. That's fine with me. That's fine with me if Clemson ends up in the SEC and it has to make Dabo be more competitive. If it makes the players more competitive. I ask you, Clemson fans, and I ask you non-Clemson fans like Florida State, how many times have you lost a recruit because the kid goes, "Yeah, I wanted to go play in the SEC." Now, granted, Vanderbilt's in the SEC. You could go play for Vanderbilt and tell everybody and their brother that you play in the SEC. Great. You made the SEC. You're probably going to get your brain beat in. But my point here is that Clemson is one step closer. If they can work this out. They're one step closer to the SEC. You think Florida State, especially if they start stepping it up? I'm not sold on Florida State, folks. Is Florida State better than what they have been? Well, yeah, that wouldn't take much. This is not the Florida State team that I watched during the 90s, part of the 2000s, and of course the national championship team in what, 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. I forget. Please forgive me. All right. It's been that long ago. This is 2023. You're staring down a decade since Florida State has been just wow. But they've recruited well, transfer portaled well. You've got to get those guys to mesh. You've got to get them on the game plan. Your very first game is going to be at LSU. But you mean to tell me that Florida State and Clemson especially could benefit so much from this going into the SEC? And let me tell you this. Do you think the SEC doesn't want Clemson and Florida State? You pull out a map of the Southeast, which, by the way, if you are outside of the Southeast and you're watching this and you're like, why is this guy so happy about the ACC falling apart? Let me tell you why I'm happy that it's possibly falling apart. It's because down here in South Carolina, where I'm located in the upstate, college football is king. People might watch the NFL. People might watch NBA here from there. Most people don't. But in this area, they might watch some NBA. You'll have your people who's going to watch the Braves. That's fine. But let me tell you, when college football kicks off, it's a whole other atmosphere. People who I've encountered here who's moved into the state from, say, the West Coast, the North, etc., they're like, wow, that's nuts. Yeah, that is the reason why I'm excited that Clemson could be joining the SEC, because that's the only destination for them. It's definitely not the Big Ten. Yeah, I know Southern Cal and UCLA, they're joining the Big Ten, which is hilarious. Folks, this is a great deal. But this also tells you, and I'm going to transition into this comment. I'm going to restore the chats here. I'm going to go back and look at the chats. I'm going to go back here and answer some questions here in just a second. But this tells you that the people who was in charge of negotiating a contract for, let's be honest with ourselves, Clemson was the only important football school that we've had in the ACC for the past, ever since Florida State won the national championship and then fell apart. And that's always been the dig at Clemson, and rightfully so. If I'm on the outside looking in, I'm not a Clemson fan, especially if I'm a fan of a team like Georgia or Alabama or Ohio State. I'm going to go, of course you're going to go through that schedule and be undefeated. And by the time you enter the playoff, you're well rested compared to the rest of us. Well, Ohio State really can't say that. But in an SEC school, namely Alabama or Georgia, LSU for that 1 year, but we know how that went. It was like a fart. It was here. It was strong. Now it's gone. You cannot tell me that when that contract was negotiated, that the very best interest of Clemson was in mind. And now you have Florida State. And they're going, hold on, we're losing how much money? And we're getting better? We know how this goes. We know how this is going to play out. Now, I've seen various numbers. You can go read the articles for yourself. Various numbers. I mean, astronomical numbers that would have to be paid out for the schools to get out of this unbreakable contract, as it's been called. They're looking at that. Like, I want you to think about it at one school like Clemson or Florida State. You have very, very rich people who are either alumni and or just loves Clemson. And all they have to do is strike a check and a $30 million facility goes up. And they don't miss that $30 million because they're filthy rich anyway. Do you think those people are not hand in hand working with their schools and then reaching out to their rich and powerful friends, especially in law? Do you think that they're not reaching out to them going, hey, pull every case study that you have. I want you to pull out all the stops, and I want you to get us out of this. I want you to get us out of this. I'm tired of it. I'm sick of it. Whoever negotiated this deal, whoever gave the secret handshake and agreed on this, should have never agreed on this. Should have never been done. I'm going to go through some of these comments. Preston Kirby here. It's good to see you. Sterling Swords, UGA keeps rolling with the addition of Dillon. It would be great to have Clemson to the SEC 2024. Yeah. First of all, congrats on that. Second of all, 17 out of 20 titles does speak for itself. You're 100% right. That's why if I'm Clemson and I'm serious, Clemson's not serious about basketball. Let's go ahead and say that. I'm going to pause here. I'm just going to say this to anyone who listens to me all the time. If you know me personally, you know that I am not a combative person. I'm not a person that I'm not going around just trashing people. I have an actual. It's difficult for me to just say bad. Well, if the truth is bad, even say it about certain people. Unless I'm in private talking to people who knows me very well, because someone doesn't live up to my expectation, or maybe they're just absolutely doing a terrible job, I never want to just attack someone over that. Okay. With that said, sometimes the truth is the truth, and you don't even have to be harsh about it. You can just open your mouth and talk about the results, and it's pretty bad. And they're not going to like you for it. And with that said, Brad Brownell has had his time at Clemson. We're just wasting eligibility with players. And I'm going to go on record as saying this, that UConn team who won the national championship, they were not more talented than Clemson basketball this year. What? Yeah. On the court, they wasn't. But on the bench, they had Dan Hurley over there. That was the difference. So Clemson's not worried about any other sport than football. And okay, all right, that's fine. Clemson needs to go into this conference. I think it would be good for Clemson to have to face Georgia and Tennessee and whoever else, according to which side of, wherever they land, how their schedule lands, excuse me. Knoxville in here, may there to you. Eric Weir. Clemson and Florida State absolutely must go to the SEC. Any other conference would be a travesty. We live in a world of travesties. Eric, I wouldn't be shocked. I would not be shocked if something, okay, I kind of would be, but I agree with you. Dale says, new conference. I don't think so. I get the idea. I smell what the Rock's cooking. I like it, but I don't think it's happening. They'll go to the SEC, and what I predict with the other schools like North Carolina State, they'll probably go to, especially for basketball. I would not be shocked if like North Carolina State, those schools, Nose Duke wasn't in there, would go somewhere like the Big East. Maybe Big Ten. Notice the SEC doesn't care if they're in. Dell says, I think we need to be realistic and follow this trend to its logical conclusion. That is a 2-conference system similar to the NFL. Not a bad idea. James Thompson says 8 teams break the contract. Maybe. Maybe somewhere around in that legal word salad of a contract, there's something in there about that. Knoxville says the opportunity is too big not to make the move. Yeah. Yeah. We're talking about a lot of money here. So if each school had to pay $20 million apiece, what's your net gain after you enter into the new contract? Because $20 million to a guy like me, that's a lot of money. But to an institution, $30 million is nothing. Hey, if your net gain is $200 million, $100 million payoff is not a big deal. These schools have that money. They have access to those funds. You have to remember that Dabo Swinney, and you'll find people, especially if they're an activist, they'll bring up Dabo Swinney and go, I can't believe that our state is paying him $11 million. Hey, Slick, the state's not paying Dabo Swinney $11 million. I think his contract is either $200,000 to $250,000 is what the state pays him. The rest per year, the rest of that $10.5 million, $10.75 million, you know who that's made up from? Donors. So before you go sit down in the middle of a road to protest, you need to figure out that the state's not paying him that much money. So those donors have the money, and they would gladly get out of this, especially if you've dangled the idea of joining the SEC in front of them. Clemson could use that. Hey, we're part of the SEC. We lost guys before because they want to be part of the SEC. Now they can be and still come to Clemson. Maroon, X Prime, Big Ten, and SEC are going to have everything soon. Yeah. They're working on it. They are. Slim Shady Canes, I agree with you as well. I agree the contract is bad, but I think this push to 2 conferences is bad for college football. Well, I could say that. I am not a person who likes a lot of things centralized. Because if you can centralize important things, you can control it more. And that sounds good on paper, but when you get people involved, it gets really, really bad. Remember, people negotiated this terrible contract. And it was to the detriment of Clemson, especially. The golden goose of the ACC in football. My Lord, you can turn on the ACC network, and then you can flip between that and the SEC network, and it's laughable. It is laughable. I mean, it's laughably bad. Noel Squad. Hey, Noel Squad. I'm glad you're here. Parker Henderson. SEC needs to kick out the ones who have not met their KPIs and add Clemson and FSU. That is very good. That's a very good thought. Vandy, you're not an SEC school. You're not an SEC quality school. Go. The Fighting Doctors of Vanderbilt. Bye-bye. I'm with you. I'll tell you this. I mean, I know that I'm going to get a bunch of hate from my South Carolina Gamecocks fans, haters. But up until Shane Beamer came along, there's no reason for South Carolina to be in the SEC. That's the only thing that South Carolina can hang their hat on. I'm going to say this, and I know that a lot of Clemson fans are not going to like this. I like the design of Williams-Brice Stadium. I like the design. I think that's something. I think that is nice. How those lights go around. That's nice. That's nice. I mean, there's people I know that I don't like, but if they drive a nice truck, that's a nice truck. You know, if they're good at sports, good job. Now, I think the location of Willie Bryce is Mad Max level. But the only thing that you'll ever hear them talk about, we playing the SEC. Now, Shane Beamer, mad respect for him. Might be the most optimistic son of a gun to go coach there and stay. He might be pickling his liver for all we know, but he's very optimistic to go there. Dale says Clemson soccer and softball is good. It may be. And the baseball team is what, top 10 now? Am I right? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But football's king. James Thompson, go where the money is, SEC. I'm going to speed this up, y'all. Sterling, I just love when Clemson plays Georgia. It needs to be permanent. Yeah, it should be permanent. Those two are the two closest major schools to each other that are actually competitive. I know Georgia Tech, for all the Yellow Jacket fans going to the Clemson hillbilly, doesn't realize that we're so close. I said, make this even more clear. Clemson is the closest realistic actual opponent of Georgia. Georgia Tech is close in proximity, but when it comes time to hit a football field, Georgia Tech is a dumpster fire with a few turds in it. So Clemson is the closest school to Georgia that is worthwhile, and vice versa. Everybody's looking up how close Clemson is to South Carolina. Let me tell you this. South Carolina might have won this past year, but I mean, that was what, the first time in actual years, including the year that, everybody lost their mind that, 2020 and started making contracts and breaking contracts that didn't make sense because of a certain thing that was going on, while other teams were flying greater distances to Clemson, South Carolina to play. And overall time, that was 8 years, 7 seasons, 8 years. Jonathan Benton, I don't think 2 super conferences is a stable situation. In what sense are Southern Cal and Rutgers actually conference rivals? They're not. They're not. That's dumb. I agree with you. I do. There's traditions that needs to be broken. I'm a tradition guy. Like, I'm the guy who watches Andy Griffith a lot because I love Andy Griffith. I own Mayberry RFD, the series that came afterwards, after, the very first episodes were Helen and such a terrible person. Andy had so many better choices. Ellie in the first season. He had that really Southern talking woman that was annoyed that she talks like she had her mouth like this, but she was actually quite sweet. And he ends up with Helen Crump. I'm sorry, you can tell I have a problem with that. I even have the movie. My wife bought the movie. You can, believe it or not, you can only buy it in DVD. We bought it, The Return to Mayberry. I think it was 1986. I love good traditions. Bad traditions I want broken. Please get rid of bad traditions. Please. I don't, just because it's been this way for umpteen, 20, 50, 60 years, if it's bad, please demolish it. Please, I beg you, demolish it. The ACC is not being good to Clemson. And if Florida State is actually stepping up, it's not being good to Florida State either. Michael Hart says, Coots don't belong. It's in the hood. Hold on one second. Chase, you said I need to put my glasses on, buddy. Looks like a dead cockroach. What are you talking about? What's wrong? Chase, what are you talking about? James Thompson says, you're right. Michael Hart says no longer top 10. Coots are 11 and Clemson is 7th ranked. Okay, I got you. Dwayne Wicker, do I really think the SEC's cutting anyone? Probably not. Not anytime soon. They should. Michael Hart, Mount Pilot. Oh, I get what you're saying. Oh, Chase, ladies and gentlemen, Chase Henderson with the cut. Williams Bryce. That's what you're talking about. He says it looks like a dead cockroach flipped upside down. Okay. Well, a dead cockroach is upside down. I was a Gamecock fan when we were an independent. Dwayne Wicker. That's a long time. Holy crap. Sterling says the Kickoff Classic going phenomenal next. This is our chance to get in. Okay, yeah. Y'all are all saying that the stadium looks like it. I don't have a problem with the stadium. I don't have a problem with the stadium. The problem is everything else. That's everything else that I have the problem with. We're in the SEC. I mean, you go to the SEC and it's like, man, my hair is big right there. God, my hair. I put on a hat, y'all, and it messed up my hair. Put on a hat, and it looks really, really bad. By the way, I have comments on my hair. Well, there was one recently. But you'd be surprised what I get comments on. So let's start closing this out at the 31-minute mark. Chase, I love it. USC and UCLA to the Big Ten doesn't make sense. Notre Dame and the ACC, limited time or in limited sports, doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, folks. Rutgers playing Southern Cal doesn't make sense. But you have to remember that with the good, we're going to have the bad. I don't like that. You also have to remember that a lot of the people who were involved with making these decisions have some relation in some form or the other to the reason that we're just now going to get an extended playoff. Now, 4 teams, I'll take 4 teams over nothing, okay? I'll definitely take that. But I want you to hear this, folks. The reason why we're seeing odd moves, the reason why we're seeing teams having to meet in private to figure out if they can legally get out of contracts is because the very same people who negotiated these contracts and negotiated these ridiculous deals, who are negotiating bringing in teams for super conferences that are 2,000 miles away and have absolutely no business playing each other unless it's a special game, but they're creating a conference, is the same people who created a scenario to where number 1 was playing number 4 for the national championship for 20, 30 odd years. The same ones who said that number 1 versus number 2, we can't do that. How will we do that? We'll turn it over to a computer. You turn it over to a computer. Well, that didn't make sense. We'll never be able to get a playoff because a playoff, oh man, the travel. How are we going to do the travel in the first week of this year? The first week of this season. I think it's counted as week 0. It might be week 1, but I'm pretty sure it's week 0. Go look it up. Hawaii will fly to Vanderbilt and play a game. This has been happening forever. These are the same people who feeds us bullcrap after bullcrap. They stand in the way of progress. I've said this, and if you personally know me, you know this is one of my things I really lose my mind on, is that progress benefits people. But the number one enemy of progress is people. And their selfishness and their stubbornness and their, how are you going to pad my wallets? They'll stand in the way of absolutely every one of us. And it is annoying. And they acted like we couldn't notice, we couldn't see the level below Division 1A. I still call it Division 1A. But we're in the FBS, the FCS. That's with like Furman and Sam Houston and James Madison was in it, and they're no longer in it. They're in the Sun Belt. But my point, folks, is they treat us like idiots. They treat the fans, the people, they treat us like morons. And I am absolutely flipping sick of this. It's just dumb. They're the very same people who negotiated this horrible contract. They're part of that group, that mindset. And we know what's driving it. Egos, power, money. Pause right there. I am totally fine if a person wants to make a ton of money. Good by me. But this is just ridiculous. Slim Shady Canes throws in there. Hot take, BCS system was better than playoffs. We'll have to disagree. We'll have to agree to disagree there. I think I understand you, and I'm going to assume just from conversations that we've had over time that what you mean is, let's go ahead and forget the number 3 and the number 4 and who got in. Let's just get down to number 1 and number 2. Let's just get down to number 1 and number 2, and let's stop the charade. Am I right? You're probably out driving right now, and I don't want you to wreck. I don't want you to wreck a truck. Michael Hart says the playoffs will make the regular season games less important. The problem that I have with the regular season, and I despise the NFL. I despise the NFL. Not all the players and not all the coaches that are in the NFL are bad, but the majority of them are. Don't paint with such a broad stroke. Well, then they should stop sucking. Group of individuals who every time some type of social issue happens, all of a sudden they're sitting in their mansions screaming that they're oppressed or this, that, and the other, and they can turn around and rape someone and be back on a football field in a year. Don't give me that bull crap. They'll turn around and look at the very schools and the very communities that help encourage them while they had next to nothing, didn't have a pot to piss in. All the school teachers, all the coaches, all the people who helped them, and in some cases wrongly turned their heads when they should probably have turned them in and held them accountable. And they'll get out of those communities like a very famous Clemson player right now who will barely even mention Clemson because he has a beef with them. That's why I don't like the NFL. But one thing the NFL does have going for it, it offers a redemption plan within the season. One of the greatest times I've ever seen, ever. One of the greatest things, you nailed it, Michael. One of the greatest, most memorable Super Bowl wins was by the New York Giants over the Patriots, and there was a great chance they shouldn't even made the playoffs that year, but they did, and they won. That's one thing that I like. I do like is that it gives chance to redemption. And for anybody who's mad that there's going to be 12 I just saw a comment. Chase, I'll have to tell you on the phone. I won't say it on YouTube, but I know why he does. I actually know. I'm going to move on with the subject. But I'm going to tell you, folks, it offers a great redemption plan. One of the things I do like about the playoffs, we're treating this number 1 versus number 12, or however that's going to work, however that's going to pan out. And we treat that like it actually is the big dance. A number 1 seed versus number 16 seed, and the 16 seed is the fighting buttholes of Butthole State. And they're playing against the world-class, greatest ever Duke, North Carolina, Kansas team that's ever stepped foot on, and it's just going to be a 9,000 point blowout. Folks, this is a top 12 matchup. In the regular season, a lot of us would be sitting there going, that number 12 team, man, they've really been hitting on a lot. They've got hot towards the end of the season. Man, I'd love to see them play fill in the blank this week. Yes, we're going to have some blowouts. But it gives a chance for some redemption. This whole leaving some teams out at number 5, and I agree with you, it used to not be that way, but trying to make the system better, I'm fine with that. Jonathan Benton said, didn't he think we favored a younger Watkins over him? I don't think that's the reasons why some of his issues are. Some of his issues with Clemson. There's other things there. I mean, I hate to say it, he was incredible at Clemson. He was incredible at Clemson, but I'm going to tell you, when Sammy Watkins, his freshman year, came in, when he came in his freshman year, and you go back and you watch that footage, Watkins was a human highlight reel. And sometimes iron sharpens iron. Sometimes it is what it is. Yeah, James Thompson, that was one of them too. Yeah. Folks, I'm going to go ahead and end this. I'm excited to see where this goes. I'm excited to see who benefits from this. If Clemson and Florida State plays their cards right, they'll join the SEC. Will the road be tougher to a championship? Yes, of course. Absolutely. Jonathan and James, there's more than that. That was one of them, and that ticked me off. Folks, I'll be very, very clear with you. And just to reiterate, and now I'm rambling. I know I'm rambling, but I'm gonna revisit this, and I'm gonna say this. When people are involved, unfortunately, we have a very bad tendency to mix some bad in with the good. Now, we try to limit that as much as possible. All right. The 2 mega conferences, I'm not a fan of it. I agree with every person who has that sentiment. But if this finally gets us out of a bad contract, and most importantly, into more competitive football, I'm just thinking football. I know the baseball team, know the basketball team, know the women's softball is doing good. I know about the soccer team. I get that. And listen, folks, to each your own. I go to church with a really massive Clemson fan. He makes me look bad. I mean, he knows everything about Clemson. I'm talking about everything. Clemson, they can plant a tree on campus, and he knows about it. He knows a lot, latitude, longitude on a map. He can point. I mean, he knows everything about it. Folks, I'm not that person. Born right outside of Clemson, had to pass the stadium every day. It's wonderful. It was precious to me. I enjoy Clemson. I pull for them in other sports. Football is king for me. Basketball, basketball, I enjoy watching the basketball team. I didn't enjoy us wasting talent this year. I didn't enjoy the message that they were going to return the guy back who's been there for longer than I've been married. And he's only been to the tournament, 3 or 4 times in that time. And he wasted a bunch of talent this year. And at times stood on the basketball court on the side in his coaching area, had his arms folded like he was out of control, and he had no say what was going on the floor. I'm sorry, I can't sit and watch that. I'd get fired if I do that in my job. If I do that in my job, ladies and gentlemen, I'm fired, and so are you. But football is king in the South, and especially at Clemson, South Carolina. I have never seen such jubilation in an area as in Clemson, South Carolina, when Clemson won the national championship twice in 3 years. You want to talk about a joyous set of son of a guns. It was us. That's how much it means to Clemson. That's how much it means to the fans. It's how much it means to this upstate of South Carolina and surrounding areas. That's why the University of Tennessee is tickled pink. Yeah, they had Pat Summitt, and God rest her soul. Rick Barnes has been doing pretty good up there in basketball. Yeah, they had a good baseball team and everything. But let me tell you what they're freaking psyched out about. It's about football. You know why? This is the flipping South. And if we can correct it, unless, now I said the bad. I'm not talking about terrible stuff like, no offense, Slim Shady Canes, but the crazy crap that University of Miami was doing 30 years ago. I'm not talking about that. But if the good outweighs the bad here, I'll take it if it fixes things. Folks, thank you so much for joining me. I'm not Bobby Durkins, at least not right here. Maybe I am. I don't know. But hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, pass this along to your buddies, your friends, even if they hate my guts or they want to tell me how my hair is terrible, I'll take it. Or I need to paint that spot back here. It's been there forever. People always tell me I need to do it. My wife's been telling me, you need to touch up that spot. So that's why I try to hide it with my head. I don't know. But I do appreciate you being here. We'll see what happens. We'll see if this comes to fruition. We'll just see how good the lawyers really are. I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.